The Human Mind Explained, in 13 minutes. The Cerebrum. The brain is the central powerhouse of the human mind and conducts all activities related to thoughts, memories, emotions, and bodily functions. It contains different sections that contribute to their crucial roles very differently. The cerebrum is the largest part of the brain that sorts out complicated cognitive functions of decision-making, problem-solving, and planning. The cerebellum lies at the back of the brain and maintains movements and balance perfectly. The brainstem acts to link with the spinal cord. It governs such life-saving functions as the heartbeat, breathing, and sleep-wake cycles. The cerebrum itself breaks down into two hemispheres, each governing on the opposite side of the body. Further, this breaks down into four distinct lobes: frontal, parietal, temporal, and occipital. The frontal lobe directs executive functions such as reasoning, planning, and speech. The parietal lobe organizes sensory information about touch, temperature, and pain. The temporal lobe is the seat for auditory processing and forming of memory, while the occipital lobe forms the visual processing hub. The prefrontal cortex. The prefrontal cortex is wedged right at the front of the frontal lobe and works as a powerhouse for human personality, decision-making, and social interactions. It serves as one's brain control center for complex behaviors and planning, expressing individuality, and fathoming social nuances. This part takes care of the so-called executive functions that give us concentration of attention, estimation of consequences, and restraint of socially inappropriate impulses. You might want to imagine it as the executive director of your brain, to make sure everything runs nice and proper. A part of it controls emotional equilibriums in human beings, so that we would react thoughtfully rather than respond impulsively. What's more, the prefrontal cortex is implicated in creative thinking, problem-solving, and adaptability. It enables us to contemplate situations in the future and set long-term goals, with the proper adjustment when those plans change. This part of the brain will be imperative in helping us steer clear of life's complexities, and hence becomes essential in our cognitive toolkit. The limbic system. The limbic system is often regarded as the emotional brain and serves as the seat of our emotions, coupled with memories and arousal. Think of the hippocampus like a librarian for your memories. It sorts through new experiences that have happened to you and basically links them to certain emotions. The amygdala is more of an emotional scanner detecting and processing emotions like fear or pleasure. The hypothalamus is an internal regulator of the body that watches temperature, hunger, and the release of hormones. These elements within their interaction form our behavior and emotional response by pulling into the fabric of our lives what has been formed initially as memories. The limbic system does not just house or store memories, it links them to our world of feeling and makes the past vibrate with feeling. The hippocampus. The hippocampus is an essential part of the limbic system and allows us to make memories and navigate spaces. It also learns new surroundings by knowing where we have been, guiding us around, and recognizing new spaces. Damage to the hippocampus can cause serious memory difficulties, including the inability to form new memories, which can be a characteristic of Alzheimer's disease. This tiny powerhouse of a structure acts as both the GPS and the filing system for your brain. That is not all that this role entails. It is also implicated in the formation of emotions associated with memories, and thus proves to be a very significant part of our emotional and cognitive lives. Damage to this area may thus not only disturb memory, but upset the integration of emotion into experiences, affecting our affective response to past events and how we remember them. The amygdala. The limbic system is home to the amygdala, which processes emotions such as fear, anger, and pleasure. It plays a very important role in developing and storing emotional memories that shape how we learn and respond emotionally. Your brain's alarm system helps you figure out potential dangers by spotting them and then cranking up your fight or flight response to protect you. When the amygdala perceives danger, the body prepares to fight or flee from the threat. On the other hand, malfunctioning of the amygdala leads to emotional and anxiety disorders, thus proving that it is very vital in the aspect of mental health. For instance, if one has an overactive amygdala, they may end up being too anxious or fearful over danger that is not anywhere near at all. On the contrary, when it is underactive, a person may not respond appropriately to actual dangers. The basal ganglia. Deep within the cerebral hemispheres lies a cluster of interneuronal clusters known as the basal ganglia, essential in controlling our voluntary movements and learning of habitual behaviors. Basal ganglia ensure everything will go just fine, be it typing, walking, or playing an instrument. Therefore, when these nuclei malfunction, very serious movement disorders can result. Parkinson's and Huntington's diseases are disorders associated with the malfunctioning of basal ganglia and are recognizable by tremors, rigidity, and involuntary movements. But beyond merely the movement itself, the basal ganglia are involved in procedural learning, helping us to create and maintain routines and habits. The brainstem. The brainstem is located at the base of the seat of the brain and acts as the most vital link between the brain and the spinal cord. It comprises three important parts: the midbrain, pons, and medulla oblongata. It's essentially the command center responsible for controlling essential life functions from breathing to heartbeats and blood pressure, sleep-wake cycles, and reflex actions such as swallowing, coughing, and sneezing. Think of this as the life support system for your brain that ensures you keep breathing, your heart keeps beating, and the blood pressure stays where it should. Consequently, severe injuries or death can be a result of damage to this part. Hence, this plays an important role in keeping us alive. It also regulates alertness and sleep-wake cycles, ensuring we wake up and wind down appropriately. It also governs reflex actions, those very fast, involuntary responses to stimuli. When you swallow or sneeze, that's your brainstem at work, processing these activities without your need to think about them. The parietal lobe. Right behind the frontal lobe, the parietal lobe processes information received from body parts. It combines sensory input into a vivid and coherent perception of the world. This lobe is essential in making judgments concerning space and finding our way around, enabling us to move and flow within an environment effortlessly. The parietal lobe does not just sense the world, but also provides an understanding of numbers and their relations. Thus, it is needed for mathematical reasoning. It helps in manipulating objects because it gives one an understanding of how to hold or use tools. This part of the brain interprets visual information, turning what one sees into meaningful data. Regarding language, the parietal lobe helps process and understand spoken and written words. The occipital lobe. Tucked away at the back of your head, it's the primary visual processor for the brain, the occipital lobe. It's like where all your magic happens, interpretation of all your eye intake, from colors and light down to motion. This area will allow us to identify objects and their spatial relationships and perceive movement, exactly the foundational infrastructure of our visual experience of the world. You could liken it to a highly sophisticated control room for vision. This lobe works magic when you look at a bright red apple or see the flight of a bird by transforming these visual signals into a coherent image. Without this lobe, it is bound to result in an inability to see and interpret our surroundings properly. You may have problems recognizing objects, interpreting motion, or understanding relationships between objects in space. This triple importance explains the vital role assigned to this part of the brain by everyday activities. The temporal lobe. The temporal lobes lie on either side of the brain, tucked under the lateral fissure. They play a key part in processing sounds and in making memories. Here, we put sounds into recognizable words, that is, into language, spoken and written. This lobe is extremely important in the comprehension and development of language and in creating long-term memories. Embedded deep in the temporals is the hippocampus, a region that is very important in storing and recalling memories. The most critical role the temporal lobe plays is in the processing of emotions and the interpretation of sensory input. It is responsible for us to derive meaning from what we see, hear, and feel. Damage here might result in memory difficulty, language comprehension, and emotional processing. For example, you may have difficulty recalling things that have just happened, understanding conversations, or reacting to emotional circumstances appropriately. Neurotransmitters. Neurotransmitters are the messengers that relay different signals or messages from one nerve cell to the other across the synapse. Some of the major ones include dopamine, serotonin, and norepinephrine. Dopamine concerns pleasure, motivation, and reward, which are linked to our sense of satisfaction. Serotonin hugely modulates mood, appetite, and sleep. Thus, it plays an important role in feeling or overall happiness. Norepinephrine plays a major role in alertness and arousal. It enables us to stay focused and vigilant. These are the important chemicals to manage good mood, cognition, and behavior. Their imbalance leads to a condition of mental health, such as depression and anxiety. Understanding the workings of these transmitters will help us understand these conditions and better handle them. Neuroplasticity. Neuroplasticity is your amazing brain's ability to rewire or reorganize itself by forming new neural connections throughout life. Such a characteristic enables the brain to be adaptive to new experiences, absorb new information, and recover from injury. For example, learning new things, new ways, or regular physical exercises could increase this neuroplasticity. It is important in, for instance, rehabilitation following most brain injuries. It also underpins a great deal of how our healthy brains teach themselves and adapt to things. So whether you are just taking up a new hobby, solving a tough puzzle, or trying to keep fit, your brain is always practicing and bettering with neuroplasticity. Memory. Memory is how our brains encode, store, and retrieve information. There are three main types: sensory memory, short-term memory, and long-term memory. Sensory memory is just a momentary holding of information obtained by the senses in less than 3 seconds. Short-term memory, also known as working memory, is used for holding limited amounts of information that will be available for only a short period of time. On the other hand, long-term memory is believed to have approximately infinite capacity. The hippocampus and its proximal areas are important for transferring information from short-term to long-term memory. Basically, it is called the consolidation process, by which day-to-day experiences tend to become long-term, valuable memories. Whether you reflect upon an event that occurred in your childhood or are learning a new skill, these types of memory interact to provide structure in the understanding and interaction with the world.